Right, good afternoon everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to another workshop as we work towards our long-term plan. The focus of the workshop this afternoon is revenue and financing policy, in particular looking at the funding needs assessment into the future. So welcome to all the staff, the officers that have come here to provide us and talk us through this paper, and welcome to everyone. We've got a full complement of all of our councillors and Mayor Scott. So welcome to everyone. So at the top of the table we have welcome Rebecca, welcome Sarah. Thank you very much for putting all this together for us. I think we've probably digested the bulk of it, but I will be encouraging everyone to ask questions, because this is a really important way of us ensuring we understand the implications of this very, very important part of the role that we as governors have. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions proposed to you, but I would probably appreciate, Rebecca, you kicking us off and setting the scene, and as we move through the paper, I know you're going to be a bit of a tag team. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Lovely to be back again with you today. So we are going to be looking at the funding needs assessments, and that's around how each activity is funded. And so we're going to review those as part of the LTP process. And this conversation today follows on directly from the workshop we had a few weeks ago with Lizzie Wessing on the 29th of April. We will recap some of the stuff she covered and then build on that. So this is familiar to you now, bird's eye view. So the red circle there is around the revenue and financing policy. So we're doing a step in the process of the review of that. And that will directly inform the rating system, and then the remainder of the LTP. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So we're really starting to get into the nuts and bolts of the LTP now. Next slide, the workshop purpose. So today, as we've said, we're talking about the funding needs assessments, and we're not seeking any decisions today, but we're really, our goal for today is for you guys to really get your head around what those assessments involve, that we gauge your sort of level of comfort with what we are proposing of the activities we cover off today. We've got 2 workshops scheduled for this, but if we need more, we will schedule more. This policy is really important, and so it will take as long as it needs to take. Also, it's an iterative process, so we will come back to what we've talked about through these workshops, and there will be some activities that we know are sort of under consideration and what we'll need to return to. So this is not like these 2 workshops are not. We're not doing it one and done. It will remain in draft and sort of a work in progress over the next few months. So inputs to today's discussion. So obviously your community outcomes and your strategic framework, which is still in draft and currently out with the early engagement for feedback from the community. We've already talked about the groupings of activities, which are also still in draft, and we will return to you with further discussion on that. But for now, we've got some groupings to work with. Obviously, the 2024 revenue and financing policy is the starting point, and then the requirements of the Local Government Act, and as I mentioned, the workshop that we had a few weeks ago with Lizzie. And obviously today's discussion feeds into the review and update of the revenue and financing policy and setting the rates. This is all about setting the rates for 2027. If you have a hard copy of the LTP, you will find that's the policy in the how we fund it part of the 3 books. and it covers several pages in that document. So hopefully you've had a look at that just to familiarise yourself with what we're talking about. Next slide. So as I said, what we're looking for you today, from you today, is your kind of comfort levels and where you're sitting with what we've proposed, or what the activity managers have proposed around how their activities are funded. In some cases, there's no changes recommended to the 24 policy, and in some cases there are some recommended changes. So we will talk through that, and we're just really wanting your feedback and guidance at this stage, and after today's workshop we'll have a bit of a feel for where we go from here. In terms of the kind of the bigger picture, the policy itself will remain draft all the way through the process until it's adopted with the LTP. So you will, at some point in the next few months, you will approve a draft for audit and then for consultation, but it will remain draft all the way through the process until June next year. Next slide.
Do you want to make a correction?
Oh yeah, also that should be June 2027 there at the bottom. Just checking to see whether you were awake. Okay, strategic alignment. So as you know, we are, all the things that we are talking about with the LTP, we're thinking about the proposed update to the purpose of local government, where the System Improvements Bill is, which is not yet enacted into law, but is expected to, focuses on cost efficiencies and core services. So we are thinking about how and what the need is to deliver these activities in terms of the updated or the proposed updated purpose of local government. The Local Government Act has a fairly prescribed framework around financial prudence and management, which we will touch on. You will have read it about it in your reader. And on that note, we're taking the reader as read. We're assuming that you've done all your reading and that we don't need to go through anything in detail today. In terms of, or at least this initial setup part, I mean, not the other part, the assessments themselves will be in detail. Strategic priorities and community outcomes. So I've underlined and read what I think are really particularly relevant to today's conversation. So we're focusing on affordability and efficiency in terms of your strategic pillars, and also what this means for the community, your community outcomes around affordability, keeping rates and charges as low as we can, around trusted leadership, leading with integrity, and we would aim to explain your decisions really clearly and so it's really transparent to the public. That's part of the process. Also, you will note in your reader that this process of reviewing this policy is significant according to your significance and engagement policy because of the potential impact on rates, the potential impact on the community, and there was one other that I have not got in front of me. Anyway, it's there on page 5. So, next slide. Sarah.
Thank you, Rebecca. Just wanting to put into the public forum that this is, I think Rebecca's highlighted it, an intuitive process, and we sort of come toing and froing, and I would just cast our elected members and probably just reinforce for our community that their views are really important to us, and they feed into this decision throughout the entire life of this long-term plan drafting process. So in the 2024-34 long-term plan, and we've included a bit of a blurb on page 17 of the reader, just a working example of what sort of how we take into account these community views, and just reiterating that these are really important and we really do appreciate our communities contributing when we go out for early engagement and consultation. The community feedback that we received in the 24-34 long-term plan did drive change at the adoption point for the long-term plan, so just really reinforcing that it's not set in stone and we will work together as we get to the final outcome. You want to start?
Were you going to talk about cemeteries?
That was the cemeteries.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in the next one.
So just trying to link back, as we're doing with all of our presentations, the related forecasting assumptions and risks that are associated with each step that we're going through. So just wanting to take the opportunity to highlight that the Local Government Systems Improvements Amendment Bill, which is to be enacted during the long-term plan period, is a really big risk assumption that we need to consider, and we will consider as we go throughout this process. The second one that's there is a really significant one for us as a council, particularly around the level of funding that we may or may not receive from Waka Kotahi. This has quite a significant impact on what will hit our ratepayer base at the end of when we get to the rating setting of the rates. We're in a position that not all districts or councils are in, with Waka Kotahi, with our FAR rate being so really large, so large compared to others. I know others sit in the 49%, so we sit at 73%, so it's significant. Highlighting that should we have a change in this will mean we will need to bring information back. So stressing the importance of that assumption and a risk. And then obviously the last one, we all know me by now, and my headroom being the one thing that keeps me up at night. So the council's ability to borrow at the required levels that we need to live through this long-term plan and beyond. So key risks, highlighting it for you, and just that our risk appetite is low for rate setting. So really important we get this right.
I was also going to say at the outset that we also want to acknowledge that council is in a funny space at the moment. The sands are shifting, and there are lots and lots and lots of questions about how things will look. In terms of how we undertake this process, it's very prescribed in the local. There's a lot of room for your discretion, but the process itself is quite prescribed, and we will follow that process. That's something that's unlikely to change, and it's key for you to be really thinking carefully around how you're funding your activities and the impacts that has on the community, because that is going to be setting the community up for whatever is to come in the future. So just sort of, like that feels like it's the elephant in the room every time we have these conversations. So to just acknowledge it and know we're thinking about that as we take you through this process as well.
So this slide is talking around the revenue and financing policy review process. So we know Lizzie talked through what the revenue and financing policy is in quite a lot of detail. So what we're trying to achieve here is we want to show over this slide and the next couple of slides that do follow how it actually translates into reality for our ratepayers, and what you as elected members and as our community see what we're trying to achieve through this process. So what is the final outcome? So really important, the funding decisions that we make affect everyone's rates bill at the end of the day. Goals are that we are transparent, that we're equitable, and we are financially sustainable council. We show how costs are allocated across the community and the rationale for those decisions, but also stressing that it's a democratic process and the community is invited for feedback. As I highlighted just briefly before, the community's feedback is really important for us throughout this entire process. Rebecca is going to hand out for us some rates bill, just so I can talk you through what that sort of looks like.
So, mate, no, you're on a roll, and appreciate that. But just wonder, is this an appropriate pause time for anyone who's... Are we all keeping up with the explanation so far from Rebecca and Sarah? Anyone want some clarification? This better not be my own rates bill. So we're all good to carry on with Sarah. I just wanted to do a bit of a check-in with everyone. Okay.
Perfect. So the revenue and financing policy sets out, it doesn't set out how much a ratepayer is to pay, it sets out who in the rating database is to pay. So it's really important we make this clear distinction. From there, what you'll see is it's going to flow through into what we call a funding impact statement, which I'll show you shortly on another slide, then into our rates resolution, then into our rates assessment, which is the rates, final step being your ratepayer invoice, which you've all got in front of you. Should have put a snip in here. So, funding sources, we go into this in quite a bit of detail within the reader, so I won't touch on this too much, but just highlighting that under the Local Government Act, Council has many means in which it can fund its operations. So hopefully, if there is questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just one from me, Sarah, and it's just a point of clarification. So item H and I around development contributions and financial contributions, they're obviously available to us, but at this stage we are unable to tap into that as a, okay, just wanted to, that's not a comprehensive list with regard to TDC, is it? Okay.
No, it's all funding sources available under the Local Government Act. At Tararua District Council, currently we do not have development contributions or financial contributions. So, the first little box that we had on the previous slide said the funding impact statement. So, because we're talking about transportation today, I'm going to take the opportunity to show you the transportation funding impact statement and where it sort of falls. So, within the transportation activity, one of the reasons we've chosen this one to talk through with you today is it looks quite overwhelming and it can be quite scary given that there are many different types of rates and funding sources we have associated to this activity. So the first one is the general rates portion, or the uniform annual general charge and rates penalties. So as you can see in here, the transportation activity does not take much of a general rates portion, and you'll see this throughout your annual plan, your long-term plan, and then we report against it in our annual reports. The next line we have here is targeted rates, which is where, as you can see, pretty much all of council's portion of the rating requirement for the transportation activity falls. Within this targeted rate, we have your roading differential, we have a rural targeted rate, we have many different rates that we'll talk through when we get to the invoice, but just highlighting that's where the money falls. And as you can see, our subsidies portion for operating purposes is pretty close to what our rating portion is, and then we also have on this side of the page funding sources for capital expenditure. So just highlighting where, when I come back to you and talk to you for the annual report and the annual plan, the decisions you're making here, not making here, but what we're discussing around the revenue and financing policy, where does it actually land? Because sometimes that gets left off and we make an assumption that everyone understands it and they don't. So just really wanting to take you through it step by step. The next piece that we have, and you'll be familiar with when we come to the adoption of the annual plan, or for past elected members, every other annual plan or long-term plan, Council is required to adopt a rates resolution in order for it to be able to set rates for the upcoming financial year. This is an extract of our rates resolution from, I think it's my proposed rates resolution, or no, it might be the resolution from the current financial year, to show the roading, what you're going to see when it gets to the adoption stage, but it shows the district-wide roading rate, roading fixed rate differential, and then your land value differential rate. So just showing all the different types of rates that fall into this document. It's really important and that we get this one right, which is why the low risk appetite in this space. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to direct you to your to the handout that you've got of a rates assessment, rates invoice. So this, as you can see, is for 26 Gordon Street, which is council's owned property. So that is where the admin building, main office occupies, and highlighting that we as a council are not immune to rates requirements for the organisation, well, for the district. So within this page, you can see all of the different types of rates which you'll expect within your rates resolution, highlighting just what it sort of looks like. This is a commercial property, not a commercial property, it is a commercial property. Sorry.
Just one So Steve has a question, but I'm not sure where you want to ask the question. On this slide, Steve?
Could you tell us what the definition of other is? Just go back one slide. No, funding sources on your, go up one. Yeah. One more. What? That's it. It's different on my page. This page here, it's got others. Other. I just wonder what that is, what the land is. What's the definition of other? Yeah, there it is, right there.
Other is everything else that does not fall into those other specified activities. Or it's not an activity, it's a grouping.
It's a pretty good answer, actually.
Industrial, it's everything else that doesn't
Category.
fall. Category, that's the best word to define that. We do say categories here too, so sorry. Everything else that doesn't fall into one of these listed categories.
Just supplementary to that, because, you know, you get different places like, say, a commercial little bit of land, and they might put i.e. like a KFC on it, or somewhere else you might put a solar farm on it, like I was just saying, and the return on that investment is huge. But it's still only that area. Is that another, is it?
So this is just specific to the roading land value differential rate that we consulted on in the last long-term plan. We do rate for the likes of your solar farm. They do fall into what we call a utilities grouping and will have a rating impact. And I think that's a question we were asked, wasn't it, in an activity session? And we've gone away and worked on this, and we'll come back with information for you specific to the solar farm, wind farm rating question. But this piece, this right here, is just specific to the roading land value differential rate. Okay, so on the back of the rating invoice that you have, page 2, you've got your annual rates calculation. So where you have the rates resolution, everything that is applicable to each property is shown on the back of everyone's rates invoice. And so this is just showing that the outcome that we make from our revenue financing policy decisions hits our ratepayers, and this is where it hits. Is there any questions?
So you can see how where there's a fixed charge, it's there. Where there's a calculation based on
Land value.
you can see how that calculation goes across the row.
Question, and it goes to the definition of industrial and commercial, because we often get, I certainly know that I get challenged around why, you know, are the rates so high and you're using land value, yet there is an item here around industrial, commercial, urban and utilities targeted differential that's based on capital value. Is that correct, Sarah?
For the roading differential, yes. For other rates, it's usually land value. Okay, this slide is just to sort of show you the funding sources, and we're walking through an example. What I would like to highlight here is the revenue financing policy is not about how much we spend for an activity. It's about making the decision around who pays for that activity. We need to make sure, as we mentioned at the start of it, that it's fair, equitable way for this service to be covered. And that's how we get to this point. So it is a mix of a general rate, which is a rate that goes to all ratepayers. It is a mixture with a targeted rate, which is to targeted ratepayers. But we also have the instance of the swimming pools and the libraries that are a specific targeted rate that TDC has made a decision on far before my time, that to bring it out of the general rate, to show it as a targeted rate so that it is transparent to our community and is shown separately within our rating invoice. So that was the decision that was made a long time ago, and that's why those two rates in particular are reflected as a targeted rate. Does everyone sort of understand this? Because this is really important and feeds into where we go moving forward.
So just on the swimming pools as an example, as a targeted rate, does that mean that for Woodville, for argument's sake, because of the people living in the Woodville area, they get targeted specifically around the costs of running the Woodville pool, or or does everybody in the district get charged as a targeted rate? Because that seems a bit strange.
I actually just had a conversation with Peter Wimsett about this before I came here this afternoon. In an ideal world, the swimming pool and the libraries would be incorporated as a general rate, because effectively that what it is. It goes to all of our rates assessments. The reason it is a targeted rate is so that it shows transparency, shows separate to our general rate and is not incorporated as part of that total. That was a decision that the council of the day made, and it is the same amount to everyone in the district. There is no south-north differentiation in this targeted rate.
Additional things. So what we have is two types of targeted rate. One that's targeted at ratepayers and one that's targeted at a service.
Targeted rates can be targeted to an activity, or to a geographical location, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, it's targeted to the activity, not to a location.
And it's the same for everyone. So that factor one, so we'd be paying the same amount for the libraries and swimming pools no matter who you are or where you are in the district. Okay. We keeping up, everyone?
Okay, back to process. So let's do the two-step. I thought about putting some cowboy boots up there, but I thought maybe that would just be going a bit too far. So the Local Government Act sets out how the revenue and financing policy needs to be reviewed, and that there's a two-step process. They need to be very clearly and distinctly two steps and not wrapped into one or not retrofitted or whatever. So step one is that we go through each of the activities and you give consideration to those bullet points up there which are listed specifically in the Local Government Act, so that each activity is considered on its own merits, and an assessment is made about, given all those things, how that activity should be funded. Then the next step is taking a step back and going, so what is the overall impact of the full picture? And are there any tweaks or levers that we can pull that don't dramatically change the assessments, but adjust any unreasonable burden on certain members of the community or whatever. So it's a step back. It's a big picture. It's like, what's the overall impact of these of the choices we've made around the activity, funding the activities. So this is not a science. Lizzie emphasised this. This is policy setting. It's not an equation. It's not a calculation. There's no hierarchy between the different considerations. You are going through each of them and giving consideration to all of them in the whole. So today we're starting with step one.
Can I just want to concur and back up the point that you're making, Rebecca, is that, there's going to be a lot of analysis and a lot of equation building into this, but the fact that we as councillors need to step back and put ourselves in the shoes of our ratepayers just to see how this might look. is a really, really important step in the stage further on. So, and it can be, I think that's where we will have the opportunity to look at what we've tried to reflect in our strategic framework and our ability to look back, stand back and say, does this still look like we're a can-do council? How does this look in terms of efficiency and affordability? So I appreciate you saying there's no science in this. This is going to be, you know, a really important step that we all have to take as councillors to say, I know the figures stack up, but how does this look? So I think it's a really important point that you've made, Rebecca. Thank you.
I'd just add to that there's no right or wrong answer in this, and it does come down to a judgment call. So just really want to stress all feedback, all conversation is great conversation, and reiterate what Rebecca has said. There's no science behind it. There's no formula that we can magically provide you. It's a judgment call at the end of the day.
And there's nothing in the Local Government Act that says that we have to do one or the other. You know, like if we said that we were going, for argument's sake, that we were going to put roading under a uniform plan, we would be allowed to do that. I mean, we wouldn't, but is there anything in the Act that says that we have to have different levels of things? I haven't worded that very well. I'm going to let you guess my answer.
Is the question that does the Act specify that roading has to be a targeted rate as opposed to a general rate? Then the answer is no. It comes back to the community benefit and the funding source that we best think represents that activity, which is the next, hopefully once we get through these slides, is where we're going to focus our time this afternoon.
Just one more, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca. We've just had Mayor Scott and Councillor Peter join us online, so can you just wave if there's a question coming from either of you, please? Cool, thank you, welcome.
I just, one of the things I should have said when we were talking about process is it ties into what Sarah was just saying about there being no right answer. So once you've set your rates and people get their bill, there might be a case where somebody's really unhappy with a decision that you've made and they might challenge you. They might challenge you through the courts or through an ombudsman or whatever. That the focus of that, of any ruling on that, will not be the decision you've made. It won't be the way, you know, the particular rate you've chosen or the funding split you've chosen or whatever. It will be the process you went through to get to that decision. So this policy, while the impact and the consequences of your choices directly impact the community, equally as important is that you undertake good process, because good process is what will keep you safe if you're challenged. And there have been several cases in New Zealand where people have challenged their local council, and in some cases the council has come out on top because they've followed good process, and in some cases they haven't. But the focus, again, is not on the outcome per se in terms of whether that's a right or wrong decision. So just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Right.
And probably just ask a question. So, as a lot of us are new to this, and it's a fair amount to take in, it would be expected that the guidance from council staff that you would highlight anything that would be flagging as not compliant or could be of risk. I think just to have it cleared up, and for us especially.
And some of the safeguards we have in place around that, obviously we adhere to the process set out in the Act, but we have Lizzie supporting us in this review, so she has done some initial looking at the policy as a whole. We will work through the funding needs assessments with you and that stand back test, which will happen down the track. It's not going to happen in the next couple of weeks because we need to get through this process first. And then Lizzie will do more review at the end when it all comes together again. And she's obviously very, very experienced in this. So we have that sort of confidence that we will be following good process and with a really good, strong compliance focus. Right. Now we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty. So brace yourselves. Now, I sort of created this, how to interpret this humongous spreadsheet slide, and hopefully you've had a read through and it's kind of clear what each of the columns are trying to achieve. What we are going to do is the assessments have been presented to you as groups of activities. Each row is an activity, and we're going to start by going through the first one, which we'll kick off with the emergency management one, line by line, so that we can kind of slowly ease our way into it and get a grasp of what we need to do and any questions and that kind of thing. And once we've done that a couple of times for a couple of the activities, if we're feeling like you've got it, your head's around it, we will then just kind of go through each line, and where there is a recommendation for change, we'll go through it in detail. But if there is no recommendation for change, we'll check in with you, see if there are any questions or comments, and then move on. Does that sound like a plan? We've also got hard copies for you, because I know that these are beastly spreadsheets and hard to see on the small screen. So hopefully there should be a set.
So while you're doing that, Rebecca, can I just back up the bus to the previous page, because we're obviously going to go into detail now around the various activities. So I think one of the points that I'd like to swing back around at the end of this is the thinking that the officers need from us is, have we got what we're about to discuss right? What is missing? And do we understand and are comfortable with the explanation? So we will take our time going through this, Rebecca, because, you know, I mean, I've been sitting around this table for nigh on 7 years and I've still got questions. So this is a big piece of work for us to get our head around. So we will take the time, and I will check in. If I see any glazed eyes, I may well ask, are you with us? You better not have any glazed eyes. Okay, so we'll just take one question from Corin first.
Just the order on this is different than starting with emergency management.
It is. That's what I was going to point out.
Unfortunate.
So do you want to? Should we just take a moment to reshuffle?
Sorry.
That was my next point, is emergency management is not the first one.
Yeah. So it should go emergency management followed by roading.
The order of where is that? How do you?
That's not what's on the reader either.
So this is the order that we'll be tackling them in here.
So let's do more than a two-step and do some shuffling.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Apologies. That was our oversight.
Oh, no, not that.
Then community.
Emergency management to the top. they will be seeing, we're going to leave this slide up. So Brenda is actually just going to take the hard copies across to Scott and Peter. So stand by, guys. We're just going to jump back a couple of slides just briefly. So these summary tables of the list of recommendations, I've put them there as a summary, but we will tackle them as we come across them in those tables. So I've just put those there for reference, but we're not going to focus on those right now. So back to the order of appearance slide. Actually, I think I did actually add the slides in after this. I did it just before we started. Oh, look at that! Magic. Right. So, here we go. Oh, I don't know whether I want my glasses on or off. Oh. So we're going to start with emergency management group because there's one activity and it's pretty straightforward. So you can see in the second column there, we have to identify the community outcomes to which the activity primarily contributes. So of your community outcomes that you have chosen, and if you want to, you can refer back to page 5 in your reader there, where the strategic framework is. The emergency management activity contributes to all of council's community outcomes. So it contributes to an affordable, efficient core services that deliver clear value. It contributes to a resilient, prosperous district with opportunities for people and business. And it also contributes to trusted leadership and meaningful community voice. So that makes sense? Right. The next column is about who benefits. So identifying whether there are particular individuals or communities that benefit from the delivery of this activity. So in this case, the benefits accrue to the whole community through the protection of life, property and critical infrastructure, with identifiable benefits to sections of the community, such as vulnerable populations, businesses and lifeline utilities. Also, there is individual benefit through increased safety, preparedness and access to coordinated emergency response and recovery support. So there's a community-wide benefit, but there's also benefits to individuals, right? Any comments or questions on that?
Thanks, Rebecca. You may well cover it fairly soon, but in the funding source column, we're unable, I guess my question relates to the subsidies, but we're unable to include in there any additional money that may come about because of a declaration. That would not get factored in there. It's just potluck if we have one versus not have one. We still have to include the cost of this activity exclusive of what might be covered during an event. Is that correct?
Yes. And we also need to resist the temptation as we go through each of these categories to jump straight to thinking about the money, straight to thinking about the funding sources. It's kind of, we have to exercise a little bit of discipline and kind of just thinking about that thing in particular. And then when we get to the end, thinking about all of them all together and balancing that up. So any further comments about the benefits column? Nope. So period of benefit. So for the emergency management activity, there are short-term, medium-term and long-term benefits. I'm sure that you have read the whole thing, but the short-term benefits come through the emergency response activities. In the event of an event, there's short-term and immediate benefits. There's medium-term benefits through recovery efforts and enhanced preparedness, so educating the community about being prepared, and in doing so reducing the impact of whatever's going to happen in the future. And then, of course, longer-term benefits through resilience, risk reduction, and capacity to withstand and recover from emergencies. So again, it kind of covers the full spectrum of the timing of things. Make sense? Right, who or what creates the need? So this is otherwise known as the exacerbator principle. And it could be a person or people or communities, or it could be something else that creates the need for council to deliver this activity. And it's often, it feels like it's the same as the beneficiaries, but sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's different. So what's the exacerbator, or what creates the need for this activity? Obviously the things that we can't control, natural hazards, climate, all of that kind of thing, and exposure created by people developing areas, putting up buildings, covering over the ground with hard surfaces and that kind of thing. So there's a statutory requirement to do this as well. And then, of course, there's community expectation. Community has high expectations of council around that. Now, the separate and distinct funding column is also a tricky one to get your head around a little bit. So there's two ways of thinking about separate or distinct. It might be separate from other activities. So, for example, in the rating invoice, it gets its own line that you can kind of draw your finger across and see that one's different from that one. And another way of thinking about it is the way it's funded. So, should it be funded from the pool, and so it kind of just the way that council gets the money to pay for the activity out of the general pool, or should it be something that's more clearly distinct or separate in terms of the funding source? So should it come out, for example, of a general rate or a general charge, or should it be something that's separate that creates a greater level of transparency and accountability?
Therefore, on our invoice, this is currently covered under item number 5, the district general rate. Is that what you're saying? Rather than the UAGC? Sorry, I want to make,
It's good.
because you've pointed out
Yeah.
that this will show
Yes.
in our rates invoice, and
Well, actually, in this case, it won't, because if you look into the funding sources column, it's primarily general rates. So,
which is item number 5 on our annual rates calculation.
yes, but under that general rate line in there, it doesn't say general rates, which covers off emergency management.
No, I appreciate that. The point I'm making is we're going to see general rate quite a bit through these.
Yeah.
So there's a lot goes into that general rate. Councillor Peter, before I move on.
So, there's obviously two general rates. There's one based on the uniform general charge and there's one based on the district general rate. And I assume when we see general rate all the way through this document, some of them will belong to one and some will belong to the other.
So, through you, Chair Sharon, within your annual plan, long-term plan, there is a section under the funding policies called the rating system. And within the rating system, we disclose which bucket it essentially falls into. Emergency management falls into your uniform annual charge, but it also falls into, so this is where when we get to the rates distribution piece within your annual plan and we talk around the portion falling into, I think it's 26 point something % off the top of my head, don't quote me on that please, but a portion of it falls into the UAGC and then a portion of it falls into the general rate. So within your rating system, we disclose the total revenue that's in the UAGC and then the rest of it will fall into your general rate. So we are quite transparent within our rating system part of our documents, and maybe when we come to adopt the annual plan this time round in June, I will really talk you through it just to make sure that we've nailed that side of the understanding.
Yeah, so then, is there many of these activities that are split between 2 and 5? Yeah, okay.
Yes, through you, Chair, that's exactly similar to what I was going to say, but we probably need that list, so we must have a list there to get it,
So I think
from a
one of the
ratepayer's point of view.
Yep, one of the closing loops in all of this, once we've worked all our way through the tables, is that we will have a list. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Simple question, why are they separated like that? Why do they have to be in two separate places in the general items?
That's a really great question, and one I honestly can't say I know the answer to. If Peter Wimsett was here, he would be all over this. Can I bring this back to you at a workshop in 7 days and answer? Apologies that I can't answer that, but I love the simplicity of that question, and I feel quite bad that I don't know the answer.
Now you probably want to get on to that column and then that column so we can keep moving.
We will take the time it needs to take. So I'm completely fine to go at whatever speed needs to go. So I guess just returning to what I said before, does that make sense around the separate funding? That's around transparency, accountability, reporting. Is it what value is there in wrapping this activity up with others versus separating it out? That's kind of the general principle of what we're talking about there. So those are the 5 categories that the Local Government Act says we have to consider. We consider the community outcomes, we consider beneficiaries, the period of benefit, the exacerbator, and separate funding. So we've established that there's strong alignment with your community outcomes. We've understood that there's community and individual benefits. It's a short to long term benefit. There's the need is created by the natural world and the community need for protection and resilience, and that's also set out in the Act. And the argument around the assessment around the distinct funding is that it's not because of those sort of global answers to all of those questions. There's no massive benefit in separating that out. There's community good that accrues to everyone with this activity. So the way it's currently funded, and there is no recommendation to change that, is that it's mostly funded from the general rate. So it mostly comes out of the big pool with some subsidies as it can be, they can be secured, whatever that word is. And as you'll note that there's a range, like 90 to 100%. So that's just to allow for the whims of any given year, how things work, whether there are events or not. So if we nailed ourselves down to a 90-10 rule, then it would be very easy to end up not complying with your policy. So just giving yourself a little bit of leeway in there is why we give a range there.
So coming back to the previous point of the 2 different rating methods, that is a lever that we could pull because the second one's based on land value. So therefore we could get, if we said that, for instance, assuming that the land values of farms were higher and they were a bigger risk from a natural disaster and things like that, then that might be a reason why we have it sitting in both places, but everyone's going to be affected. I can sort of understand the logic of it, but that could be a lever that we could pull. We could say if it's currently 50-50, we might say between 2 and 5, we might say we want to go to 20-80. I don't know. Corin looks like he wants to comment on that.
I was just going to say that UAGC can only form 30% of your rates revenue. So that is a heavy lever on how far you can push in that, and that's to ensure that councils maintain a balance between a flat fee and charge based on those who have more value in property, paying more.
It goes to the point that when it came to step 2, that little step dance, is that those are the kind of scenarios, Councillor Peter, that we need to step back and ask ourselves, how does this look? If we look at the land that's likely to get hit in a weather event, for instance, and load it either way based on that, the challenge we will have, no doubt, Rebecca, would be the little wiggle room that we've got might slew completely one way one year and somewhere else the other. So it's a very good, that's where the step back and see how this might look judgment is really important. Are we just about through this table, Rebecca? Okay, Councillor Steve, and then I'm just going to do a whip round.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As that makes up about 6.4 million of the money that we raise, that targeted rate, the AGU, Uniform Annual General Charge. The question I'm asking is when the water job changes, because that's in the targeted rates. I know it's on that form there now, but specific services like water, sewage and rubbish, etc. So when does that dynamic kick in?
It might be a good question for when we get to that particular part of the table, perhaps.
I see it split out on here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What I don't want to have us do is get too bogged down, because there is a lot of this to get through. I'm guessing that once we've done this once, the next iteration might go a bit quicker. But before we move off this, I was going to do around the room, and I see that Mayor Scott and Councillor Peter have a question as well. So do you want to come in, Scott and Peter, and ask your question now?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. With regard to this example we've got of the council building, am I right in assuming that those are all on capital value rather than land value, the percentages?
Through you,
given that commercial is rated on capital value, not land value.
Through you, Chair Sharon, on the you'll see you've got your description on the back of the invoice that shows all the charges. Then the next column is category, and it shows how that has been calculated and applied to this specific property.
Page 2, Peter. It's a good question though, Councillor Steve. We won't miss it. I just want to make sure that we go activity by activity, and then maybe, because one of the questions we all need to ask at the end is what have we missed? So park that question, please. Are you okay, Councillor Peter, with that answer?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, I'll let...
Comments, questions, ready to move on to the next one? Yep.
We've got one. Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, with the subsidies, I might have missed it, but it's from central government if there was a weather event, or no?
Through you, Chair Sharon, the subsidies could come from absolutely anyone. In the past, we have had subsidies from Lotteries Commission as part of our recovery phase from Cyclone Gabrielle, and that put generators and the likes out into our wider community. So just having the ability to have revenue projected from subsidies just gives us that little bit of flexibility, but not a guarantee. And it only gets budgeted, not to go there, but it only gets budgeted when it is certain that it will be received.
To stimulate your brain a little bit, the next one is transport. This one has 2 activities, so it's only a one pager. Okay, so what we'll go through this one in a similar fashion, and because the funding sources, the funding arrangements are slightly different here, we'll pause on that and chat through that. But in this case, we've said that this activity, the roading activity, aligns with 2 of 3 of Council's community outcomes, so affordable, efficient core services that deliver clear value and a resilient, prosperous district with opportunities for people and business. In terms of the who benefits, so there's the community as a whole with access to the network, and then there's obviously identifiable parts of the community and individual users. So again, across the whole spectrum. Period of benefit, there's immediate and ongoing benefits and long-term benefits over the life of the asset, and obviously improvements keep up the intergenerational side of things with those big heavy-duty assets. Who or what creates the need? General community use. Sometimes it's pretty obvious when you think about these activities who creates the need for roads, but we still go through the process, I guess. The activity managers have included also regulatory and safety standards, weather events and climate impacts, and then growth and land use change. So where there is development in the district that contributes as well. So in terms of the distinct funding, roading activity is a major activity with high transparency requirements, and a lot of that comes obviously through NZTA. So separate funding provides transparency and accountability by clearly identifying the cost related to the delivery of local roads and enabling scrutiny of the expenditure and service levels. So can you see that on your invoice? Yep. There you go. So that's calculated on land value.
If this wasn't the council building and was, a farm on... What are you laughing at, Councillor Chris? There might be some additional lines in there, would there?
There would be an additional 2. One would be your roading rate, fixed rate differential that we have, and then the second one would be your roading rate land value differential, which we brought in last long-term plan as part of our forestry roading issues that we were incurring at the time.
Sorry, Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Sharon. Just a quick one around fees and charges. I'm assuming that's developments or forestry blocks that may get charged, or someone who gets charged for additional use of the road, or is there targeted something there?
The fees and charges that would be applicable to this activity are your corridor access requests revenue that we bring in. It would be if we have... Do people know what that is? Corridor access. I only know that it's called a corridor access request. It's the ability for you to access the road. I'm like drowning. Do your work in the corridor. Permits that may be required is part of that as well. Traffic management plan if we have generated any revenue from doing anything in that space as well. It's not a significant amount of revenue, which is why it's in the 0 to 5 fees and charges portion. I know the Mayor has a question. Okay. If you don't mind, I might take the opportunity, just because I know Peter Naylor asked us a question when we were doing proposing the endorsement of the proposed draft annual plan. And one of the questions he asked us was, why is the transportation roading activity only 35% of the rate take? And the question came around, and said you're going to find out more as we get through to this process. So the rationale for it is your NZTA subsidy forms 65 to 75% of it. So that's why that part of it is so minute, especially when you compare the policy maximums across all other activities of council. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to address that if you, thank you.
I'm pretty sure you answered that for me at the time. Perhaps you didn't answer, but I understood your answer. If you felt that you hadn't given me a good answer, I understood it then. So that's why it didn't stick in the back of my brain that you'd done anything wrong.
Move along and not mull over it any longer. Councillor Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, where do you capture the roading rate for dairy?
For a deal, we should have brought my property as an example as well. Sorry, just try not to.
Well, in the
disclose
sense
public-
of the dairy tankers and all that on the road.
Yeah, so that comes into your roading differential rate that we have, but because the Tararua District Council isn't part of that activity, there is nothing showing on this example of a rates notice, but I can circulate a lifestyle or a dairy rates notice for you to see it if that would be of.
Sorry, the question is it covered? That's what
Yes.
I want to know. Thank you.
It was on that list of several slides ago. There was dairy, there was non-dairy farming operation, forestry. They're all there. It's just
The other question.
if you're not. No, other was completely separate. They were all there. It's just, yeah, if you had my address or your address, we'd be seeing it. I'm going to swing round to Mayor Scott. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Hey, just a quick question on the funding sources, Sarah, with footpaths with a 75 to 85% subsidy, which just confused me because I think I'm misunderstanding what that means. And I suppose the roading at a 65 to 75 when our FAR's 73%, so just trying to understand why there's that variance and then why the footpath subsidy is apparently so high when I thought we didn't really have a subsidy in that area.
Great pickup. And as I was reading through this just before we've got here today, I've asked the same thing. So I know we've got a recommendation, no change from 2024 policy, but I would propose that as a recommendation to change that subsidy value in line with what we show under the roading activity. In footpaths, because 85% subsidy is significantly higher and outside of our FAR rate. So just wanting to make a correction there to management's recommendation.
Perfect. No, that makes absolute sense because that's where it did sit. So thanks, Sarah.
Councillor Peter.
Yeah, I thought that we didn't get any or much funding at all in the previous long-term plan at all for footpaths from what somebody had said to me. So is this an aspiration as opposed to a reality?
The time in which the revenue and financing policy was adopted, we didn't have confirmation around what our NZTA or NLTP 3-year program that we were approved for. So at the time that this was done, it probably was completely appropriate and within what assumptions we had made within that long-term plan at that point in time.
So we need to come back with it
Yeah.
updated.
Yes, so supplementary to that is realistically the recommendation, no change in policy, likely to, because we're in the same situation now, I assume, and that we haven't got the, but we'll get that in August, so that'll be in time for us to make any changes by December before adoption in June, if I've got those dates right.
We will just bring back a complete updated version with the correct management recommendation just to really close the loop and make it clear for our community and our elected members.
So I know we've skipped into footpaths. So the top roading funding source, that recommendation of no change still applies. It's the recommendation on footpaths that will need to change. Is that correct?
And I also just, wanted to pick up on on what was just said around that 70, the FAR rate. Oh, it's coming up. The FAR rate is at 73% at the moment, but it's need to be confirmed. That comes obviously through from NZTA, and that's their processes are slightly kind of out of sync timing wise with ours, so that will need to be confirmed in August when that comes through. So,
Chris.
Thank you. Bit of a wider question. So, where we've got these funding sources and the numbers that are sort of set as no change or anything there, if there's a group that needs further funding for something that's upcoming, say like emergency management, where they want a piece of software or everything else, so they have to have a budget in place and hand it in before the LTP's all done and before we start agreeing to things. And then, or worst case scenario, if we say had to replace a bridge, that's going to have an impact on things. Are these numbers factored in, and what happens if it changes after we've already started to make that decision?
So within each annual plan where we refine years, subsequent years of the long-term plan, so years 2 and 3, we will bring a proposed annual plan through to you, which will factor in such circumstantial changes that may occur. And within that, we report around our compliance with our revenue and financing policy. And if we are out of compliance within it, we do give an explanation as to what, where, why, how, and we do sort of factor that in, that our elected members are adopting this knowing that this is outside of our policy because of certain circumstances. We would prefer not to operate outside of policy, but just there is the ability in such circumstances to do an exemption around it. Did I answer your question? Okay.
can I clarify my understanding of your question? Just, were you also asking about whether there's an unexpected bump in expenditure and how that feeds into this as well? Because I think that slide that we had earlier on might be useful around the relationship between the budget and the this one here, where the amount it costs to fund the activity, it doesn't matter, you know, like if it's, for example, if it's $1 million activity in the first line of that column, if it's $1 million activity and it's funded 100% from the general rate, then we'd get $1 million from the general rate. If it's $1 million activity that's funded 60-40, then those ratios still apply. So even if there's a bump of unexpected expenditure or whatever, we would still be drawing those same ratios from those funding sources. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. I just wanted to check I was understanding you properly. Right, any more questions around the transport? To be clear, we will come back with a clarified one on the footpaths, but anything else to question there before we move on?
One good? Oh no, sorry.
Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, Chair Wards. I guess this is quite a broad question as well, but if external subsidies reduce unexpectedly, what planning is in place to avoid sudden shocks to ratepayers and to council, I guess?
In the roading activity specifically, we would need to gear up to present a potential change in level of service would be the most logical answer, and I think we did do that when it got to the footpaths. So once we got confirmation around what our NLTP funding was in that space, the next annual plan we presented and we consulted with our community around, do you want to put in from our depreciation reserve funding of X amount, and that would enable us to continue keeping the existing level of service that we have in that space. So it depends on how quick we need to react, but generally it will feed into a level of service discussion, which would be a consultation piece with your community. Roading is a significant piece of our budget, so that's probably a really big exception. Generally, any other pieces of subsidy generally wouldn't impact us as much as what a change in our FAR or our NLTP budgets look like.
I just make a comment on that FAR part as well, Sarah, and it reflects the shifting sands comment you made, Rebecca, that as recently as last Friday when Corin, Scott and I were in a rural and provincial forum, you know, with the discussion around amalgamation, just talking to other rural councils, that if we end up in a group, potentially, they will have different FARs to us. Rangatiki, for instance, I think they land at 66, Palmerston North is 50%. So those shifting sands around this particular needs assessment into the future will be very challenging. Right, we all good to go with transport, Rebecca? What's the next one?
The next one is strategy, policy and governance. So I think I'm getting the feeling that you're asking good questions and you're getting the hang of it. You understand what we're trying to do, and you've kind of we're building up steam here. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I think I'm happy to go line by line and check in, but we probably don't need to go through each item, each cell. But please ask questions as we go. Don't let something pass you by that doesn't make sense.
Okay, so I'll go first, if that's all right. So looking overall at the strategic planning and policy activity plus the next one, why? Because we will get asked this by our ratepayers, how come the funding source for that, for the strategy, is wrapped up in a support services allocation, and the next activity is wrapped up in general rates? What's the diff between those two buckets of money, please, Sarah? And I'll come to you, Councillor.
The strategy, planning and policy has always been a back office support function. You'll recall I talk about support functions of council, and I use the example around finance being a gift to everyone. Our strategy, planning and policy is no different. It is a back office function in which we deliver, and because it is a back office function, it does fall into our support activities and does fall to the internal overhead allocations that we do. The reason democracy services is, I'm not going to say you're not a gift to everyone, because you are. Please hear me when I say that. Is it's a frontward facing activity of council. So that's why it's treated slightly differently as opposed to a back office. We haven't previously had strategy, planning and policy as an outward facing activity of council until now. Has that answered?
Councillor Peter, but when, for instance, we're sitting with another ratepayer who's just got their rates invoice and they're saying, where the heck, why am I paying and where does it come from for the gifts that you've talked about, the finance, the strategy, all of that? Someone as ratepayer is paying for that. Where will they see that in this?
It will be captured within the uniform annual general charge and as well as the district general rate. But what I'm hearing from today is maybe this is a really good opportunity for us to work with our wonderful comms team and how amazing they are with their infographics and sort of do up something that explains where each sort of bucket or each activity falls. Would that be something that would be useful? I know we've in the past, I think we had like an elected member sort of day, and we had balloons was the example, and this is what falls into this rate. So the comms team are really amazing and really clever, and maybe I'd take an opportunity to work with them and come back with something that will help you understand that.
Appreciate that's one way of addressing it. Councillor Peter.
Yeah, so the support services allocation is a bucket that has lots of services that are pulled out of it, including the strategy planning policy. And trying to think how I word this carefully. So on this, we could say that for strategy planning and policy, could we get a percentage of how much of the support policy allocation that is?
We could.
So that would just give us a clearer understanding. So if this was 5% of the support, finance was 95%, then we, because you provide such great value, then.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, that would help clarify for me exactly where it goes. So yeah.
That can be popped into the.
Yep.
Awesome. Any questions on this? We're all on a roll now. Now we're getting the hang of this, aren't we? Excellent. How many more have we got to go, Rebecca?
That is up. Timing wise, we'll fit in as much as we can fit in the time we've got allocated. So
I'm just wondering, given how much we've had to absorb, whether or not we just took a 10-minute break.
Totally,
but is
totally,
this an okay time to? Okay.
Perfect.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Peter Johns? 10-minute break? Give us a wave. Okay, so we'll cease the online for 10 minutes and bring everyone back in at 25 to 3. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Are we back, Mayor Scott and Councillor Peter? There they go. Awesome. The next topic, Rebecca, you'd like to step us through, please?
Okay, so community, I just put that up there so that, you know, in your spare time, if you wanted to put them in the right order. The next one is community. So I'll give you a mo to find that. So this group covers a few activities: customer services, libraries, communication, visitor information, economic development and community engagement. Activities, there's only one recommended adjustment, which is quite minor, to the funding sources. And the economic development, we will, it's sort of on hold for now until you guys have done some more work on that. But let's start with customer services. Any comments around that? Nope, that one all makes sense to everybody. Libraries. All good. Next one. Communications. I'm just wondering if have you got your pages sorted in right order? You found your second of your communications page. Yep. Visitor information.
I'll go to Mayor Scott first. And have a question on it as well. Mayor Scott.
Thanks very much, Chair Sharon. Just on communications, I say in jest, but not in jest. Our team are doing such a fantastic job. Is there an opportunity to create some revenue and contract out and get them to be doing some of the amazing stuff they're doing for us? So I just thought I'd put that there.
You're smiling, Sarah. Any comment?
I would expect nothing less from you, Scott, with that comment. Thank you. And I'll leave that for the group manager and the activity manager to come back with any suggestions.
So I have a question related to the visitor information one, Rebecca. Is this where we have the potential from the eyesight contract to be reflected in there? And is that, if so, is that, or are we in a situation where we've taken $1 each way, as it were, and allowed the flexibility?
If my memory serves me correctly, the grants that we provide for the eyesights wider than our Woodville site sit under the community support activity, which is not this specific activity. This is just around Tararua District Council's eyesight operations. So just your Woodville site and then incorporated into Dannyburg Service Centre.
So a simplistic question, which you may well be able to answer then, Sandy, as you come forward. Why is there potentially up to 100% rated by a community if we are receiving income from the eyesight contracts? I guess I'm questioning if we're being paid. Oh no, we pay them. Oh.
Yeah.
Apologies.
If your question is about the fees and charges, is that?
Yeah. That's where I wanted to chime in.
Right, so the fees and charges is quite a nominal amount that we get through, and it relates to our commissions through like selling bus tickets and things like that, and then also from our stock sales and yeah, item, like nominal items. Okay.
Long enough for me then, apologies team. So is this a question about visitor information, Mayor Scott?
From me, Sharon, if you want to get through it, I mean, I'm all for the recommendation, no change from 2024 policy.
No decisions have to be made. Thank you, Councillor Peter, but I get the point. You want me to keep moving. What's after visitor information then, team?
Community engagement.
So you've recommended some changes here, and I'm sure Councillor Peter wants to ask why.
No. I was wondering with the community engagement, this isn't where the Explore Pāhia Tour and Positively Woodville sit, is it? Or where, because we're not receiving, or we are funding those services, but they're not in this particular line item.
Through you, Chair Sharon, the Explore Pāhia Tour and the Positively Woodville fall into the Democracy Services activity of Council.
We're not going back to right at the moment, Councillor Peter. So it begs the question then is why the change in your recommendation? What's changed? Have we potentially got more opportunity to get some subsidies? Why have the team come up with that?
I think I've proposed the recommendation and it is to align with actual results that we're receiving for that activity. We do receive a small amount of subsidy. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head if our Mayor's Task Force for Jobs falls into this grouping. It does. Oh, there we go. That's exactly why we've proposed a change, because we get external funding to fund that. And creative communities. Thank you, Sandy. Oh, and it's written there too. Sorry.
We are nailing this. On to waste management and minimisation. So, actually, do you want to give a bit of a...
Waste management and minimisation grouping of activities. Finance has recommended splitting these into 4 distinct groups. Not groups, but 4 distinct line items to give us better transparency and remove any room for a grey area when it comes to our funding splits. So what we're trying to do is be a bit more transparent in this space, isolate out the transfer station portion of the activity so that we are 100, no, not that one, that is the ability to we are providing a transfer station to our community which falls into the greater good public benefit piece that we have articulated extremely well within each of these cells. The next item is to just...
Which next item?
The refuse landfill isn't on our hard copy.
Okay, on the screen, on the soft copy, on the screen. So we have waste management refuse landfill, which is where we are proposing that this is 100% user pays. This is the cost that you incur when you dispose of your rubbish at a transfer station. So the rationale is to completely separate out the public benefit of the transfer station and apportioning a portion of that to the next couple of activities that we have, one being the landfill. And then if I move to the next slide, and I'm happy to go between, where we have the recycling services and then the curbside recycling services. So just really separating out each for transparency purposes and ensuring we have the right people paying for the service in which they're receiving. Have I any questions?
Councillor Peter, and then I'll come to you, Mayor Scott.
Yeah, I've got a number on this and I'll ask just 2. sorry, numbers too.
Get excited
So-
up here then, Peter.
So waste management transfer stations, we've got fees and charges. Fees and charges recover costs for green waste and e-waste users only. So does that mean the fees and charges that we get for the general waste are subsidised by the general rate?
No, we're proposing to have them in the next line, which is your landfill, and your cost, which is 100% user pays.
Okay, so what we're saying is the top line is the current line, and we're going to split this into the three below it.
Yeah.
Gotcha now. Okay, probably answers my second question. Oh no, it doesn't. So the second question was on the recycling.
Which one?
So the second item.
The recycling,
The
just
recycling
not
item.
curbside?
Yeah, curbside. No, waste management recycling.
Yep, cool.
So do we get any revenue for from the recycling? So glass, the tins and the stuff like that. So
Yeah, so that's what's proposed to cover in the recommendation change out to the side, is to reflect actual revenue that we're receiving at this point in time. So we do have 0 to 10% worth of fees and charges, because we do receive a small amount of revenue when it comes to our recycling materials. And then subsidy to factor in our waste minimisation levy that we receive every quarter. So just recommending those changes in that.
yeah, so yeah, I think the fees and charges was where I was missing. The revenue gets allocated to fees and charges. So that's why I asked the question. Well, I'm all good.
I'm going to come to Mayor Scott and Peter.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Just wanted to talk about the transfer station charges. So moving that to 100% fees and charges. That's what was being looked at. Is that right?
No, the waste management transfer station line is council providing transfer stations to the community and the costs associated with having transfer stations. So any resource consent fees that we're required to do, any monitoring we're required to do, the rates for the site, and then that is to be apportioned out across the other activities within this, being the landfill where you dispose of your waste, being 100% user charges, your curbside recycling, a portion of the transfer station being allocated here because your recycling all comes to the Danube transfer station, and then your recycling facilities, as in having your containers and the likes available for the community. So just trying to really draw a clear line that there is a public benefit, but it goes across each of these activities, and trying to ensure the right user are paying for the service that's being provided.
No, thank you, Sarah. And I don't disagree with the concept, and I'm trying very hard to keep to what Rebecca said at the start of not looking at what it might actually do to fees and charges and other pieces, but to flag it might be an important consideration, because there is a real public good in not having as much fly tipping and other things. So it's something that crops up a lot. There's a lot of community interest in the amount of illegal dumping that if fees and charges change, what might we expect to have happen to that, and then the public good to be factored into it. Without knowing what it would do to fees and charges, it's hard to see, because you're talking about apportioning the cost across others. But I just wanted to flag there that there could be some other public good arguments within it.
I think this might be another one of that step 2, step back to see if we do this, what are the perverse implications or the unintended consequences. That's concurring with you then, Mayor Scott, on that issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it regulatory or community and rec, is that
Rebecca's just asked me, and rightfully so, just to highlight around the curbside recycling and the targeted rate, and that we do have a consultation item that we would be looking. We have told our community we would be doing, particularly around the Northwood Ormonville area, for what this looks like moving forward as well. So just highlighting, and that it is just to those ratepayers that have the service available to them.
So before, when we talked about targeted rate by activity or by location, in this case it's by location, whereas we talked about the pools being by activity, right? So this would be targeted to the people who actually get the curbside service.
So Councillor Peter, are you seeking a targeted curbside service?
Yeah, for my rubbish, paying a fortune to Murray's contractors. But there was, joking aside, there was some vague recollection in the back of my brain here that someone said that we were exploring the cost of actually doing rubbish collection as well.
I'm not sure what conversations have been had, but it was scheduled in the 24-34 long-term plan to be considered in this next 3-year period. Part of the 17A review, Hamish has just told us. What a guy.
Hold your breath yet. Anything else before we move off? All good?
Okay, so the next one is regulatory, and we're just doing a little bit more work on the activities within the regulatory space, so we will bring those back to you. So we will move on past that. And the next one after that is community and recreational facilities.
Oh, can I just back up the bus? So what we have in front of us for a regulatory, we can just park for a while.
Yes, we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
So the next one is community and recreational facilities, and it starts with parks and reserves. So no change recommended to parks and reserves. The next one is forestry. This one might need a little bit of...
I'm on Parks and Reserves and I'm reading that funding source going, that's not correct. Sorry. Move on to forestry. Forestry is a completely self-funded activity of council. So council, a bit like the pensioner activity, council holds a separate reserve, in which case all revenue and expenditure comes in and out of there. We last long-term plan, with the proposed sale of Birch North and the significant reduction in what that activity looked like, a call was made to group forestry in amongst the parks and reserves, along with where other councils had who had forestry activities, who had grouped their forest. I think the proposal is to remove it and have it as its own. Yeah.
That's another conversation, but and just to drop it in here but not spend time on this, central government has recently released a mandatory list of activity groupings, which is, there's just a few little differences from what we've got up here, and one of those differences is the forestry that will come out of this particular grouping, but we will come back to you to have that conversation. So.
Recommending no rating change, so still remain self-funding for whatever the forestry activity for council looks like in the longer term. Next one, public conveniences.
Public conveniences and community buildings. So I'm sure it will come as no surprise that there is some more thinking being done around the community buildings activity, so we will just keep that one on ice for now and come back to that.
I might be speculating here, Rebecca. I mean, you've indicated here that there's some more work in the ratio split. Which way are you thinking? More fees and charges or more general rates for the community buildings? I know it's a topic of much debate, is that the more we might want to charge for a community building, the less utilisation it may get. So I know there's a fine line, but which way is the thinking going at the moment, or are we still a bob each way?
I'm not sure that enough thinking has been done on that to be able to answer that at this stage. Sorry.
No, thank you.
And to be fair, it may come back that once the work's been done, there is recommended no change. It's just that, yeah, that's still being considered.
I think I'd just add to that last long-term plan, we did try to make quite a significant shift to user pays, and we had a utilisation fall as a result. And I know it was quite a heated discussion amongst the room at the time, especially around this, and our parks and reserves as well. So all of those, I would imagine, Hamish and his team are considering as part of that.
Swimming pools?
Yep.
On this topic, Councillor Peters?
You know me, I keep to topic. So, what percentage of the entrance fees? I assume we charge entrance fees for swimming pools. I've never been to them myself, but yeah, what percentage of the entrance fees actually cover it? Because it seemed to me that we're subsidising it through the targeted rate, quite significantly. So, what percentage of the user fees cover the operating costs of the pools?
Council currently does not receive any revenue back. It is a grant that goes out to community groups that run the operations of the facilities. However, with Paetua Pool and with council doing the operations of that, we need to look to increase that fees and charges split against the targeted rate split to ensure we are factoring in a fee increase that's going to come as a result of the usage of that facility.
So, excuse my ignorance, I should Steve. So, should probably know this, but we've got the Woodville pool, we've Danny Burker's Y Splash, which is outside of council. Is there any other public pools? Igahuna. Okay.
Yeah. So any revenue that they generate goes back into offsetting the costs incurred, because the funding that council provides is not enough for the operations of each of those sites. Wimbledon is one as well. My apologies. Thank you, Hamish.
Councillor Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, in any business case, is there any figures coming back? Projected turnover and incomes for these pools?
With reference to the Paetua pool or everything?
Well, obviously there must be data from Y Splash because it's been going. There must have been information from other places because they've been going. And of course, now we're getting this new one. There must be a business case. Otherwise, I've never been in a business where we don't see a business case.
So given that the recommendation is once they've incorporated the operational costs of the Paetua indoor complex, as you've noted there, so I think it's a fair point you make, Councillor Steve, but the data for that is in another forum, and that obviously needs to be included in any of the equation that you build up. And I'll just keep it simple. So, for instance, if we have a general fee for the general good of provision of swimming pools, there may well be part of the equation that has a bit of the cost of Ikirahuna or Wimbledon or whatever. That analysis has not been done yet, and that's what will influence the percentage change in that I'm picking. Is that correct?
Yes, so the cost of operating the pool, we are as best guesses with the information that we have available to us at the time, noting we do not have construction underway yet. There's a lot of moving parts, so we're trying to buy us a bit of time to make sure that we've set this up the best way possible to ensure we meet the needs of the Paetua community, as well as bringing in the fees and charges component of that. But I would say there was an initial business case that went to council in January 2021 around the Paetua complex that shared all of those things.
So just to clarify, at the moment, we're not getting any significant fee or charge. And so that's why we're going from 0 to 15%, and which may go to 20% if we just get the numbers from Pāhia too or something. Okay, cool.
I just want to remind us that we need to be, when we're thinking about the funding sources and the splits, that we are taking the assessments into account, and we're not thinking about the dollar amounts and the amount it costs to run and all of those things as the starting point. So we need to be just keeping in mind that all of those other parts of the consideration need to be there front of mind, influencing how you decide the most appropriate way to fund this activity.
Still very high level. These are guiding principles, and as part of the review of the policy, that's where we're landing at the moment. But there's obviously some analysis still to go on in that particular area. Thank you. We're up to cemeteries then. Is everyone happy with swimming pools? I'm waiting for you, Sarah, to say it's completely self-funded, and I'll just look.
I don't need to. You've taken the words right out of my mouth, and we've all learnt this on our journey, haven't we?
Aerodromes, there's some changes here.
The recommended changes here are just to align to the actuals associated with that activity of council.
So it's been pulled out.
It's been pulled out from being grouped as part of Parks and Reserves and on its own, and just aligning to what that activity on its own does.
Any questions around aerodromes?
I think you answered it just then, but because I did have a question, does this mean there'll be any increase in user charges? But no, because the user charges are already in place, and so what we're doing is just aligning the policy to the reality of what the current situation is.
So this is around that whole distinct funding, transparency idea. Yeah.
And with the ranges we've got with 0 to 10% coming from the general rates, that might be to cover some things that we might have to do in terms of certification or other things that aren't funded via the fees and charges, or just a bit of flexibility.
I was just going to say, I actually learnt something yesterday which I will share with you. So councils, what that rating portion of that will actually be funding is the airstrip portion that council has the risk associated with it, the health and safety aspects. The airstrip is councils, we can't lease that out. That is our responsibility. So that is what your 0 to 10% in rates, or whatever I've got down there, is general rate is saying contributes to.
Councillor Steve.
Thank you, Chair. What is the definition of past few years? 1, 7, 6, 5?
Its entire life in my time here. It's always been incorporated within Parks and Reserves.
17.
10. 10. 10 that I know of.
I'll say you're right.
There is clearly
21.
A reason why they want to make this recommendation then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything more about aerodromes? Good.
Me? We haven't allocated this slide out. Apologies. So this is just a bit of a blurb we've come up with to show or explain how support services are funding. They don't fall into a direct general rate, targeted rate nicely like other parts or outward facing activities of council do. So the way in which the support services activity is they get allocated 100% out across the entire organisation, and then they land effectively on the outward facing activities of council. So where their final landing spot is the way in which they are rated for. So if this portion falls to Parks and Reserves, it would be rated in accordance with Parks and Reserves, or if it fell into the aerodrome, it would be factored into that 0 to 10% general rate there. Is there any questions?
This is the support service bucket that we referred to a little while ago. No questions? Really, really, aren't we?
You guys are superstars, man. I was thinking we might be booking another workshop, but you guys are so onto it.
I've got some questions for you.
So that brings us to the end with a couple of caveats. So we need to come back with the regulatory activities to discuss further, and we are going to make some touch-ups here based on some of the conversations that we've had today, in particular around the footpaths. And once we have worked our way through any outstanding activities, we will come to the part 2, which is to then go, so kind of doing all the maths and looking how all the chips fall. What does that look like, and where are the tweaks and levers that you guys can pull to ensure that it's a good balanced picture? Some of the things that need to be progressed before we can get to that point are the sort of what does the economic development activity look like, and so a little bit more work on some of the questions around some of those community recreation and facilities items. So we will keep this conversation sort of on this the slowish boil. We'll come back to you with the regulatory stuff, but we'll keep it on the slow boil until we're ready to go to step 2. Yeah, like I said, once we've got through step 2, we'll be in a position to have a draft policy that you can look at in the whole, and then it will go off to audit. Some homework for tonight. You can go dig up your own rates invoice and have a look at page 2 and see what you can identify. That you've learned today that you didn't know before today, and that might prompt some more questions. Sarah will be on standby for any questions about your rates invoice. Checking in.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to land it so far, Rebecca. So there's been a lot going on today. If we reflect on what the purpose of this workshop was, it was about making sure that we had a pretty grounded understanding of the relevance of our revenue and financing policy, the overarching elements of it, but then begin to start looking at some of the nuts and bolts. This is the language that you used at the start, Rebecca. But one of the questions I have for everyone is pretty much the first 2 bullet points that I just want us to take a breath and go around the room, and if in the couple of hours discussion we've had, are you sitting comfortably with where those splits are, where the funding sources are, and what have we missed? You've already reflected on what we've missed to come back to, and that's the regulatory, the economic development activity. I hadn't included the homework in there, so I'll have to wrench the rates bill off my husband and probably depress myself when I look at page 2. So let's just do a quick whip around so that we've landed for everyone on the team. Councillor Steve, is there anything that you think is missing or you'd like more consideration of?
I just want the information, more of the information that we didn't have today. Thanks.
Councillor Allison.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I'm pretty happy with everything, but I guess following our conversation, our meeting this morning about the cemetery and how about Mangatara Cemetery and how there are some plots that are sinking. Where will that funding come out of once we, start the process of fixing what has occurred? Is it from what we've just talked about, or I'm just curious is all. Thanks.
It will come out of either the general rate that is in there or your fees and charges. It will come from, what happens is the total revenue is the total revenue, which includes fees and charges and the rates. We can't change that other than increase any fees and charges because we've had greater usage of a facility or a service. The costs will have to be incorporated into the budgeted operational costs that sit within that activity. Or we will bring something similar to, I think some elected members will recall last year in quarter 4, period 12, around the roading, where we brought a separate resolution to carry forward operational underspent funds or the like. So we're still working through that to answer your actual question.
So what we've discussed today, Councillor Allison, is about setting the year ahead, setting where we think the overall pool of money is going to come from. Clearly within our annual planning process and operational activities. If something significantly changes in that, the general manager and that operational team has to find the money within the budget or come to us for the exceptional circumstances that are laid out. So it's like setting your cash flow for the year ahead. You give it a pretty good punt, and but the discussion for us as governors is where it lands in terms of, do we ask the whole of the district to pay for this, or are we looking for some splits to those who are actually using the activity either through a targeted rate and or they pay at the door, as it were.
Thank you. You explained that really well. Makes more sense. Thanks.
Councillor Chris, you comfortable?
Yeah, comfortable with where they're sort of moving to. It's good to get some information. It's basically a budget working backwards, and then splitting it across the different parts of the business and covering head cost and every other piece.
Yeah.
I just fall back to knowing what our ratepayers always go to, which is trying to cut costs and being open and transparent with things. So seeing the line items, as painful as it might be to have to answer to that, I'm supporting the idea of opening up even a bit more to go, this is what it's for and this is how it relates to everything. So I think Bernard mentioned some stuff about percentages.
Councillor Peter, anything that hasn't been covered off?
Yeah, no, just coming back to that earlier point of line 2 and line 5 on the annual rates calculation here between the UAGC and the district general rate. When we've got general rate on this form here, I notice sometimes it's general rate and something else, but earlier you'd said that a lot of the items actually have a general rate and a district general rate, general charge and a general rate. I'm going to use those two terms. So 85 to 95% of general rate, for argument's sake, for community buildings, is it difficult to actually break it down into 85 to 90, to 70% to 80% of uniform memorial general charge and 15 to 20% of the thing? Is that a lot of work, or?
Through you, Chair Sharon, it's actually something Gavin and I chatted about, or I want to say last week or maybe the week before. In the 21-31 long-term plan, when we got to each activity, we said how much of that was to be allocated to the UAGC and how much of that went to the general rate. When we updated the 24-34 long-term plan, that was removed. So we would be looking to, our discussion internally was bring something like that back into the 27-37 long-term plan, but we can go away and tell you what the percentages are of those activities that currently fall into the general UAGC, the uniform annual charge. But remember that that's your mechanism that we use to distribute the rates impact across our district. So it's fluid.
Yeah. Yes. And we are capped. There are within the 30%. Regulations. There's only so much we can put into that bucket. Otherwise, all good? Councillor Urina.
I'm a good. The ladies have explained the funding sources well, and I think that we're on the right track.
Councillor Kishan.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the recommendations presented. I think that it makes sense to me right now why you've put those there. And yeah, I just look forward to carrying on the conversation and like Councillor Steve Wallace said, just a bit more information, particularly with the pay atua pool and those sorts of things. So kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm just, I guess, in regards to these in 3 months, we've got to have some sort of plan. I'm sort of just, and we don't know what the plan is because we haven't been told the plan. So I'm a little bit, I'm still quite, I'm just a little bit confused. Like, it's almost like you're, yeah, I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's those shifting sands. We're not sure where those have landed. So in the absence of a definition around those shifting sands, we continue with the process. That would be the most reasonable approach at the moment. So, but park that concern, quite right. Councillor Peter and Mayor Scott, got any final?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, over the years we've thrashed out the user pays vis-a-vis general rate side of things often and long, and arrived at pretty much the figures that were shown there. And you could tweak them, and we could argue for hours about how to tweak them and whether it's worthwhile. But I think from this, as far as the current situation is concerned, that's as good as we're going to get.
From my bit, yeah, generally happy. I'm particularly interested in what it's going to look like. So as a first cut, great. But we'll be very interested at what impacts any of the changes might make. So I look forward to seeing that, and we can have another discussion.
SCE, he's been very quiet this afternoon. Any closing thoughts?
Just that I think this has been a good session, and I think it's great we've got through as much as we did. You know, this is a key mechanism for the council in deciding how it wants to spread the costs of running the district. So it's an important conversation, and it also speaks to the flavour of the council, because councils do tweak it, and you know, some councils come in and far more heavily in the user pays space, and so things will move that way. So it's an important process, and it's an ability for you as a council to make your statement about how you see those charges falling across the district, or the cost of running the district, most equitably sitting.
Closing comments from Sarah and Rebecca. You've done a fantastic job, the pair of you, today. Thank you so much for stepping us through the way you have. You've got enough guidance that you're very clear at the start. This is what we want to try and land today. There has been a lot to go through, so you go for it.
Can I just finish? I'm conscious, that we've really covered a lot of ground here, and there might be, like, you know, when you lie in bed awake thinking about these things, you know, something might occur to you, or something you realise something didn't make sense, or whatever. I really want to encourage you to make sure you ask your questions along the way, and I would encourage you to use the question sort of portal that we've set up, because it's a way of you getting them to us in time for us to, if we have to do some research, to do that before we come back to you, because you know, obviously if a question comes through here, we're thinking on the fly, and if we've got the answer, that's great, but sometimes we don't always. So if the question comes to us earlier, that's really useful, and it's also a way of us having a record of the questions, so that everybody has access to the answers, rather than you emailing an individual and then getting a reply kind of thing. So if you've got questions in between time about this or about anything, use the QR code or the link that we're providing in these workshop documents, so that, just a reminder.
Councillor Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Like on this rate demand here, 50% of it's water.
So I wanted the one topic that we haven't come back to with your
And
question.
you said you were.
Is that, and I'm getting to it
Good,
before I
thanks.
close, is that water is not included in,
I know, but it is coming. It's coming.
but that's not for us to be planning for. It's going out.
It's going out, yeah. But it'll be in another bucket over
Yes, so there'll
here.
be another invoice for water, and that's not
Yeah.
our concern at this stage. You happy with that? It hasn't been a missed item. It's because.
Oh, no, I didn't say it was.
Just wanted to make sure. Right, any closing comments other than that? When do we meet again on this?
Well, as I mentioned, we've got it scheduled for next week. And then we also had one for the 3rd of June. And I'm just thinking about timing and what we need to get done. And I'm wondering whether it might be better to do the 3rd of June, like to since we've
Give
done
you the
everything
time.
we've already
Yep.
done. Yeah, we'll not have next week's 27th, and we will go with the 3rd. I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants here and looking at all the big people to say that's okay, but that's my suggestion.
So that will be reflected in any changes that come out through our calendar. So, okay, before I ask Councillor Keishan to close us in prayer, thanks very much, everyone. Once again, lot to get through today. Very impressed with the calibre and quality of the questions as well. It was always said right from the start by me, Scott, there is no dumb question here, and I think any question that's asked, it just adds to the understanding and the comprehension for all of us in the room. So thank you for your attendance today, your patience, your acceptance that you had a different voice here at the front who didn't have to throw anything at anyone. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to those who have joined us online. And I'd just ask Councillor Keishan to perhaps close us in prayer.
Tēnā tātou kia unui, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou arikia I hukarauti, ko te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene.